Welcome back to MidPoint. Also, welcome back Associate Professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada, Veronica Kitchen. Veronica, when it comes down to the infiltration, terrorists coming into the country, here in America there are people worried, and there are people, I think rightly worried, that every single day there are terrorist groups that are coming into this country one way or another, borders, planes, ships, whatever you want to call it, and they are looking to create the next 9/11. Is there a fear in Canada that that level of attack is coming, and that if the Canadian authorities are not fully aware of what's happening and write up every single day on everything they can do, that perhaps hundreds, maybe thousands could die in one single attack?
First of all, I think there's a couple of things to say. First of all, large-scale terrorist attacks are very difficult to pull off, and they're very rare. And in fact, the reason we might be seeing smaller-scale attacks like the attack that we saw 2 days ago in Quebec and like similar attacks on armed forces personnel we've seen in France and the UK is that it is so difficult to pull off a larger scale attack. I would also say that we shouldn't think of terrorism as strictly a problem that comes from somewhere else. I think it's very clear that in North America and in Canada and in the United States, we have a problem of domestic radicalization where individuals who are citizens of our countries, who live in our countries and who are born and raised, are radicalized to the point where they wish to commit violence. And so thinking about it, I mean, that's not to say that we shouldn't monitor borders, but perhaps things like exit controls, as Canada and the United States are trying to implement along the beyond the border agreement, so that we know when people have left the country, for instance, and not just when they come in, is a way of cooperatively trying to solve what is a transnational problem.
Why is it then that Canada is more concerned about what goes out? Because what you've just said is very different from the American approach to it, because there's always the concern that they are coming in to the border, specifically along the southern border. But you seem to indicate that there's more concern put on who is leaving. Now, I know, for instance, the individual who died in the attack a couple of days ago, he had been kept from leaving Canada, I believe, for a couple of years. So why the focus there from the Canadian side?
Well, certainly because we don't want Canadians leaving to commit violence in other places. We don't want Canadian citizens contributing to wars and terrorist attacks in other places. And we also, if they do that, we also don't want them then coming back and perpetrating attacks on Canadian soil.
How then does Canada differ, in your opinion, when it comes down to the radicalization then of the youth? Because we've seen teenagers even to this point, and certainly people in their late teens and early 20s who want to become members of ISIS and other radical groups. How does Canada do it differently perhaps than America?
Canadian police services are working very hard on, particularly the RCMP, on counter-radicalization programs, at developing good relationships with various communities so that those communities are able to alert the authorities if they think that an individual in their community is radicalized to violence. So, for instance,
I was going to say, is that maybe, in your opinion, what America is not doing well enough, and that is getting to those communities and infiltrating those communities?
I wouldn't call it infiltration. It's a matter of working with communities to make sure that you have a good relationship so that, for instance, if, for instance, in the case of the individual 2 days ago in Quebec, it was a local imam who had initially, from what we understand, made contact with the authorities and who was working with the authorities to try to prevent this individual from committing violent attacks. I don't know a lot about American counter-radicalization programs, but I think certainly every country could stand to do a little bit better and to make sure that they're not antagonizing communities that they need to work together with.
I only got about a minute left, and let me just throw this out. I found this recently. With the possible exception of the United States, there are more international terrorist organizations active in Canada than anywhere in the world. This comes from a study that was done in August of 2002 by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. That's astounding to hear that 12 years ago that this was already being talked about. Fair to say that there are many things such as this, that Canada's been on top of this for a long time. They're not just sitting back and waiting.
Absolutely, and we've certainly seen plots that have been thwarted in Canada. The Toronto 18 plot was thwarted, the Ville Rail plot was thwarted, an attempt to attack the Parliament buildings in Victoria was thwarted in 2013. So certainly the Canadian Security Intelligence Agency is aware of the problem. Canadians have been dealing with the threat of terrorism for the same amount of time that the American government has been.
Do you think maybe we worry about it more here in America than the people in Canada, or maybe Canada just feels a little safer?
I think that's possible. I think that there are probably more high-value targets in the United States than there are in Canada. The United States is the global superpower, and it's inevitable that there will be more people who are interested in attacking the United States than almost any other country in the world.
More targets here, of course. Veronica Kitchen, unfortunately, we are all out of time. I thank you so much for your expertise, and I hope we get a chance to talk again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, later this hour, the potential powder keg that is Ferguson and the instigators driving potential violence. That and more coming up right here on MidPoint, where